Megan Campbell, and I still have shit to say, but with somebody else. So our first guest ever on the podcast is a fellow therapist, Matt Hedding-Hess. Do you want to introduce yourself? I know you already.
Yeah.
He's fantastic, but yeah, you want to tell the listeners about yourself?
Sure. I'm Matt Hedding-Hess. I'm a therapist at Rise and Thrive Wellness in Kankakee, and also the president of the Kankakee Area LGBTQ Network.
I love that.
That's me.
Yeah, all the things. So I invited you on because I wanted to talk about identity. I feel like identity can be a hot topic, specifically also where we live, because we live in I don't know, would you classify this rural? I'm from Las Vegas, so I would say it's rural. We live in the cornfields.
Yeah, we're pretty diverse, rural and urban, and
yeah, it's weird,
all
right?
the things.
It's a weird place down here, and I feel like identity is a hot topic here. I mean, it is everywhere, but here as well. So. Yeah, I don't know. You want to kick us off talking about I'm like putting you on the spot. Like, I think, earlier we were kind of talking about how identity has just like shifted and changed over the years. And you were talking about intersectionality. And I don't know if you want to share about that, like what the fuck that actually means.
Yeah. Intersectionality is the idea that we aren't just one thing, right? We're a conglomeration of lots of identities kind of converging in my own individual self. In therapy and in different capacities, I've used the social identity wheel, which is a cool tool to think about all of your identities and how they may impact where you're kind of coming to this current moment and time in.
So that kind of includes like age, gender, religion, right? And
roles.
we'll tag it in the show notes so people can see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. It's a really cool, and just thinking about how all of those identities may impact how you're kind of coming into a space. And intersectionality is, we were joking about, I don't know when exactly it became a thing, but right, when there was a time growing up where you'd
be like one thing, right?
One thing,
yeah.
And that was who you are.
You were like a jock or a emo or I grew up in Las Vegas, which is much more diverse, and still it was like, you were like the mean girls, right? Like the little cafeteria, like you could be a jock or a band geek or a this or that. Like that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So, this idea that with intersectionality or the development and understanding of intersectionality, that we're lots of things, and those all play an important role on who we are and how we view certain situations. And so
this feels great. And the last podcast we just filmed, we talked about like feedback and like knowing your core self so that you can show up and decide what feedback you take or what you don't, and like what spaces and places are safe for you.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you have thoughts about like how that applies, or just even, I don't know, anecdotes.
Yeah. Well, I guess that makes me think of like, being in a rural community. I always think about growing up in the literal cornfield. My high school was in the middle of a cornfield. I was the only gay kid, and just how that played a role in me feeling really ostracized or not a part of the community that I grew up in. And now, like, growing older, I've found community and found other people like me.
You've created community.
Sure.
Right? So there's also that space where it's like, in response to that, you were like, well, this wasn't here for me. Let me create it too. Like, yes, you find it, and
yeah. Well, and I think part of creating it was finding that there were other people like me, that like there are other queer people in our community, or that, even finding friends that went to the same high school as me who later came out as queer or whatever. Identity is important. I know a lot of people get upset or bothered by like, why do you have to label yourself and things like that? But
aren't we all labeling each other all the time?
Totally. I'm of that mindset.
I mean, I was like, we were talking earlier about like, yeah, we're fucking judgy. We're judgy as shit. Like, right?
Absolutely.
Like, and it doesn't always have to be a bad thing.
Yep.
Right? But I feel like the idea that we're like not labeling each other is kind of bullshit.
Totally.
Totally. I think it's also an excuse because they feel uncomfortable with the labels.
Absolutely. Yeah. I say, like, there are 7 billion people in the world, and there are probably 7 billion different identities, right? Like unique individual people.
Well, with that, like intersectionality that you're talking about too, right? Yeah. Like not everybody's going to have the same grouping.
Yeah. The queer folks get a bad rap for that because we kind of have been expanding the language and different labels and identities for years. And I'm always of the mindset that like we do that to ultimately get to the point of realizing that we're really just unique individual people. And so the more we expand those labels, ultimately, I think we get to a point where they don't matter. And they don't, I mean, they're important, right? They help people understand who we are and kind of how we come into a space. But ultimately, we're just unique individuals. And when we get to a point where you can accept and just affirm people for who they are, then those labels won't matter. But we're not there yet.
Yeah, that's like such a utopian idea. But I just even wonder too, is like, as you're saying that, the thing that resonates with me is this idea of like the identity or the label only matters as much as like what the person views about that, right? Of just being able to make space of like, if you claim this, what does that mean for you? And like, how does that play out in your life? And maybe what parts of you show up or need safety in what ways you need. Like, I think even as a therapist, I've had people say, I'm this and this and this. And then we have a conversation about what that means. I'm like, oh, like my view of working with other people or being in space with other people was different than what they're identifying as well. So like the label like kind of matters as a baseline, but there's also so much more nuance to it too. So it kind of doesn't, like it does and it doesn't matter, kind of what you're saying.
Totally. Yeah. And I would say that's something I have shit to say about is...
Yes! Tell me.
As a therapist, right, one of the things that I think I've been shocked by and kind of annoyed by is this idea that you have to see a therapist that looks like you or has the same identity as you. And while in some cases that makes a big difference and can be important to the work that you're doing, on the opposite end, seeing someone that looks different than you and identifies differently than you can also be really impactful in the therapy setting too.
Which is interesting because I also just got done talking about like how do you develop yourself and how do you hear and accept feedback and like not live in an echo chamber. So that's also hard when you're thinking about like if I have to see a therapist with the same, I would say even intersectionality, because a lot of times they're not coming in just being like, I need to see a white woman who's Christian, or I need a white woman this or that. Like they're like, I need this and this and this, and she needs to be a parent and this, and it's kind of like, that's a tough ask, and for what purpose?
Well, and I think it's true of our community too, especially. I think a lot of therapists in our community are a specific identity and or have specific identities, I should say. Maybe they're not all the same, but have specific identities. And so like as a queer person, when I'm seeking my own therapist, it was important to me to find another queer therapist or at least someone who was queer affirming. But it was important to me the first time I had a therapist, it was important to me that they were a queer person. I was coming with very specific issues.
Like the reason you were going to therapy, that's what mattered. But also you're talking really about safety.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like even like from a standpoint, we were talking earlier about like the identity of a mom or a parent, right? Like if that's what I'm going for, maybe I need somebody who works with that, not necessarily is a parent, but also it says about safety too for you. So talking about being a queer person and needing somebody who is affirming and safe, and because like, let's also be real, there's a lot of people, including therapists, that don't always know their shit or how to make people feel safe, which we have that in our community.
Absolutely,
like,
yes.
We talk about that all the time.
I say often, yes,
like,
there's real harm being done.
There is.
With queer folks, I think with people of color,
with minorities in general. We're also just talking about people with disabilities, people with, right? Like,
So this ideal of like cultural humility, cultural responsiveness, the value of going back and getting trained every year in understanding our biases and things like that around certain identities is really important. So, but I do recognize that like in the therapy setting, there's value to sitting across from someone who doesn't look like you or doesn't have the same upbringing as you or the same
like
belief
both,
system.
right? Like there's a value of sitting across from somebody the same and somebody different. You were sharing earlier about like a situation you had in grad school with that.
Yes, yeah. In grad school, there was, I love the ability to consult and kind of like bounce ideas off with other therapists. I miss that about grad school, right? But in our internship at our practicum or something, there was an older man, he was a veteran and a current police officer going back to school for his counseling degree. And he, in his practicum, was working with a Black woman. And there was just so many complexities, so much really quality sort of like meat that was talked about in our consultations about like how to work that to be beneficial for that client instead of being harmful. Like, right? Like, how do we create the space in the therapy setting to be powerful and helpful for that client, where she came into the therapy really defensive with that person as a police officer and those sort of things. So,
well, and like devil's advocate, the hard part is like, at what point does that not need to be that client's story to help that therapist jump over those hurdles too? And I think that's the hard part as clients, is sometimes they do want to go and not have to leap through those hurdles. You know, like I think it starts to be like, who's the therapy for? Like, I think your example is like, there was so much intention.
Yes, in his training.
Yes, right? In his training and like in what he was getting and the support he was getting. And then unfortunately, sometimes then we launch into the world as therapists and we're not getting that support. And I think like, how often do we talk about like the public at large as therapists? Like, we're not always following up. We're not always getting the support. And so there is harm that gets done, like knowingly and unknowingly.
Yeah. Like, I mean, a lot of the reason for developing our consultation group that we run too, you know, like I felt defeated when I get clients that were seeing other therapists who were having real harm done, being told that they were not, you know, trans, or
using their dead name and refusing, just like flat out lack of safety.
And just feeling like as therapists, we should be more culturally responsive, and you know, it's frustrating when our colleagues aren't doing that and don't have that mindset of like, you don't have to agree with someone even, and their identity. Not that you should agree with an identity. I think that's a silly thing to even think, but to really be doing good work and like
own your
affirming
shit,
them.
right? Like own your shit as a provider. And doctors are the same way. I think it's really wild is like, when you're younger, you think like so highly of these professions, right? Like we take this oath to do no harm. And then we're out there just like, kind of just doing whatever the fuck we want sometimes. It's wild, because I would say the same thing. Like, I've had clients come and express deep harm that have been done. Like, oftentimes we're doing work to like heal the harm done by providers, whether it's doctors or therapists or like people we put on a pedestal. But that's also an identity.
Yes.
Right? Like, therapists have an identity, but then Megan has her own shit that Megan has to work on, right? Separate from being a therapist. And I'm not immune to that either. I think that's hard.
Yes. And I think it's all about knowing your biases around identities, right? I acknowledge growing up in the middle of a cornfield, very little diversity at my school, and growing up and moving into the city a little bit too, like then being exposed and experiencing lots of other cultures and people. Like, it is a beautiful thing to be able to experience diverse identities and be in community with people that are different than yourself, and it's a good thing as professionals to put yourself in those scenarios more often and learn and grow. You know,
what do you say to the generations, because we get this a lot, of that are just like, no, you're just making things complicated, like you're just adding more fuel to the fire, that's not what's really happening, it's a trauma response. We get that one a lot, like that identity is just a trauma response, or like, what do you... We did not pre-talk about that one. I'm just throwing that shit out there. But I think that's one that comes up a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think, what do I say to those people? I think if you don't grow with the times and kind of learn and understand that people are different and that these really do make really important impacts, our identity has an important impact on who we are as people and how we're showing up in settings, then you become obsolete, right? Like if you're sticking with your perspective and your understanding of the world, you are not doing good work. Especially as therapists. But just also as humans.
Right, that comes up with parenting, it comes up with jobs, it comes up with, right? Like,
totally.
I mean, I think you're really talking about like how do we co-create safety with people that need something different than us? You know?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about parenting, right? Like, I think about the intersections of my identity as a parent and what I'm learning as a parent, and how I show up to parent my son, intersecting with my role as a therapist, right? Like, I know a lot better than maybe our parents. I shouldn't say I know better than my parents. My mom will hate that. But
We won't tell her. I won't send her this.
we as people know better when we've like grown and gone through training and things like that. You know, it was a discussion about like why we don't spank or you know, those sort of things. And so that's an intersection of my identity as a therapist and my identity as a son and as a parent.
But you're also talking about like how you're bringing all of those pieces together, which I think is an important piece. Is like, you know, so often we want to fracture parts of ourselves. Like we want to be like, I can only be this in this space, and so I leave all that stuff. That's bullshit,
It's just
right? Like,
impossible.
It's right. It is, unless we truly are like fracturing our or dissociating or like really checking out from parts of ourselves.
Yeah.
Like it is so impossible. Like the shit that makes me rageful at work makes me rageful at home, makes me, we were just talking, I was rageful that somebody parked in a handicapped parking spot at the post office. And then I was like, I know this person, they're an able-bodied white man who shouldn't be taking that space, right? Like that shit makes me rageful here too. Like, I can't just be one thing in one place.
Totally. And I mean, the more we know about identities and why they matter, the example of the, you know, the handicapped parking spot is a great example of like, there's a reason we don't take up space of disabled or handicapped folks. And, you know, we have space for them to be able to access the world in a safe way. And that I think that's true.
We hope we do. I mean, sometimes
the
we
aspiration
don't, right?
is
The
to,
goal is, and that
Totally.
applies to other people, right? It's like, how are we making space that is safe for people? And I mean, I wonder what your thoughts are too about so often like the privileged community, right? Like they deem what's acceptable for them. Like you can have that space over there, or like, I think you need this. And I think that's an interesting thing that is occurring as well, as opposed to like, let's co-create spaces. And what does that mean? And like, what of my space do you need to take or amend or like do those things? Or just even like, I'll hear stories where people are like, I need this accommodation at work and my boss is treating me like an asshole. Like, or I need this, or, you know, sometimes we fill out FMLA paperwork. FML is not what I wanted to say, but they probably do feel like, fuck my life, right? Like, and some of like, if space is not made safe for me.
Yeah.
Because we are different.
Yes. I find that to be true working with the LGBTQ network too, is like our whole goal is creating space within our community, right? Like I grew up in the community that I grew up in wanting to get the hell away from this area and to a place that had community for me. But what I found in doing that was like, that community was already there, like, and I'm a part of that community. I mean, even just realizing how intersectional I am in this community. So, you know, the whole idea is creating space as part of our community. And so, you know, there's still pushback from that, right? Like you said, privileged folks, you know, we have got an event coming up tomorrow that people are pushing back against, right? Like us, like, why do we have to make it about, you know, a Pride Day? It's a freaking farmer's market. Well, yeah, it is a farmer's market. And there are queer farmers. There are queer community members who come into farmers markets.
Why isn't the question, why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So, you know, there's a lot of effort to keep people siloed. I would argue that the idea of creating these sort of like, you know, events or spaces is actually about welcoming everybody into those spaces, right? Like having a Pride Day at our farmers market isn't about
like
making
nobody
it a gay
who's
day.
not queer don't come to the farmers market.
Yeah,
it's like, no, let's all be in space and community together because we already are.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
Like we already are living, working, breathing together in spaces.
Yes. And, you know, I think LGBTQ folks specifically get this rap that like we're a specific community, but like, let's be honest, straight is a sexual orientation. Cisgender is a gender identity. Queer people are not the only people that have these identities, right? So you're a part of the LGBT community. If I could so challenge, I feel like that might be a controversial thing to say, but
no, but you're talking about kind of the overarching umbrella, and right, straight cisgender want to like take themselves out of that when really you're saying no, there's a spectrum, and that is a part of the spectrum.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. The social identity wheel that I talked about at the beginning is like this idea that there's all these identities around the wheel: sexual orientation, gender identity, your sex, your roles in your family, your religion, and you are the person in the center of that tire. All those spokes are separate, but you're the person that kind of comes together in the middle. And so, yeah, we all have all of those identities, and we don't often think about them unless I feel like you are marginalized or pushed aside because of those identities.
Right.
That's really that idea of privilege, is like, I don't have to think about the fact that I have a sexual orientation if I'm straight. I don't have to think about
Right,
the
if
fact
I'm
that
the privileged one of each area.
yeah, I don't have to think about what it's like to be a Muslim person in a Christian community, or all these sorts of things. Yeah, I think that's why I love that as an idea to think about your identities. So it's a great tool. So I hope people check it out.
What do you say to people who are like, holy shit, I didn't know I was that complicated because I'm privileged?
Yeah.
Like, what do you say are maybe some good questions for them to think about or reflect on? Because we often talk about kind of like takeaways and like self-awareness, whether they're going to therapy. And this would be a great thing to take to therapy
Totally.
if you are not already talking about it. But if you're not and you kind of want to do some reflection, what would be some questions about intersectionality and your own identity that might be helpful to know before you think about the spaces you're in?
I was just in a training today. During introductions, I had everybody introduce themselves with the identity that they think about the most often. And everyone in that room struggled with that question. They were like, what do you mean? And I'm like, what identity affects you most on a day-to-day basis?
That's wild. The first one I was like, business owner.
Yeah.
Because it's like 90% of my work, right? Like it's wild.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah. And it's so interesting, the variation of then responses, right? Like I think sometimes women very much are aware of the fact that they're women walking through the world every day, right? Black folks are very aware of their race walking through the world. And so but also like if you're a parent or you're a business owner and that affects you on a day-to-day basis all day long.
There's different things. And I have privilege in other ways, right? I am a white woman, so there's other privileges where that one feels way bigger for me right now, right?
Yeah.
Like,
so I guess to
but I
answer
think
your
that's
question,
a great question of like, what's the one you process, think, or maybe like wear the most?
Yes,
or lean
exactly.
to the most?
And then on the opposite end, like what's the part of your identity that you don't think about or you don't wear? I like that as an example.
That's just
on
so
a regular
privileged
basis.
potentially because you don't have to.
Or is that then an identity that you hide, or like is there shame around that identity too, right? I mean, I think that's important to think about. So those would be the
Which
the
is hard
questions
because
that come to
sometimes
mind.
the things we feel shame about are the things we think about more often than that
Sure.
too. So so that could fit either way as well. Yeah. So
Yeah.
and then maybe even adding that of like, how do I make space for everybody else's wheel?
Yeah.
Would be a good one.
Totally. Yep.
So wild. Got any other shit that you think we should cover today? It was very informational.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad. Yeah. Not that I can think of.
Okay.
I think identity just is.
It's nuanced.
It's nuanced. Yes. And I think that's so special. I think that, there was like, when we were younger, it's like people would say like, oh, you're just unique and you're special. And like, but we're not. We're also, I mean, in a good way,
like
we're
like
also
a fingerprint,
special.
right?
Yes.
Like
We're also unique. And I think that we bring value to spaces when we come ready to share our identities fully. And so
if it's safe.
if it's safe,
Yeah,
100%.
I think that's the hard part is unfortunately we live and work in communities that don't always make it safe for people to share those things.
Yes.
That's the fucked up part about all of it.
It is fucked up.
You know? And just even like, it can feel so big and so heavy. However, if we all are each thinking, how do we make safety where I feel privileged? And how do we ask for what we need?
Yeah.
We can change a lot of shit.
Totally. Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
You had way more than just shit to say. You had like knowledge bombs. So
Thank you.
thank you so much. And that is a wrap. If you made it to the end of this podcast, thanks for listening. As always, if this episode brought up anything that you'd like to delve into deeper on a one-on-one basis or any kind of mental health crisis that you might be going through, please see the show notes for resources and references as well. Thanks. Hey, girl, hey.